All right. So, as you can see from your sheet of paper, it says that tonight we're going to be talking about cultivating friendships. Now, when you hear that word cultivating, what do you think of? Farming, growing, gardening, which which I am not very good at this, like at all. I've never tried seriously, but the little times that I have, it hasn't ended well for the poor little plants. Like in my backyard right now, I'm trying to grow grass, and I did it at the wrong time. I laid seed like a week before those monsoons came, so let's just say I don't have any seed on my grass anymore. Or on my, there's little spots, little sprouts every now and then, but the Lord decided they needed to be scattered somewhere else than where I put them. But so we're talking about cultivating, talking about gardening, and what are some of the things that need to take place when you garden, when you farm? You got to clean out the weeds. So you got to get the weeds out. You got to fertilize. You got to water. You got to research. You got to put in good soil. So there's, maybe this is my problem, right? All of what you guys are talking about is a lot of work, right? Maybe that's my problem. That's why I kill things, is because I don't do these things. And I look at the weeds, that's not that bad. I can get those next Saturday. But that's, in a sense, what we're going to be talking about today as we're looking at cultivating friendships. But before we do that, what we're going to be doing today is building off of the lessons that we've already gone through. And I know this is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I'm going to ask you guys to try and remember some of the stuff that we've talked about already. I know. But so I'll put this up here. So these are the 4 lessons that we've gone through already. I did the first 2, and then the last 2, Pastor Austin was here talking about the grace of friendship and the threats of friendship. How many of you were here when Miss Rita and Miss Kay? That was the last time, 2 weeks ago. That was wonderful. That was a wonderful nice little interview. And I don't know if you guys know this, but they have done like an extended version of that little interview. That is, I think it's either on the church website, it's on YouTube, but having them talk about what it looks like to be faithful servants of the Lord, faithful servants together in friendship. And one of the things that's really neat is Miss Kay, it's her daughter, Margaret, that was interviewing them. So I thought that was really neat. It's a wonderful thing. So I highly recommend that you guys go find that because, like I say, it was an extended version of what you guys heard a couple weeks ago from them in this class. So here, just a quick review. So we talked about the what and why of friendship. We talked about what is friendship and what friendship is not. And do any of you remember what friendship is not? Facebook. That was one of them. Or the show Friends, because that's fake and not real life. And Facebook, even though you click on the button and you say friend request and it tells you officially that you guys are friends, I think I said I have like 800 something. There was somebody in here who had like 1,300 something, and I'm pretty sure there's people who have so many more friends than friends, I should say friends. So what friendship is not, but we also talked about what friendship is. Then we also talked about a theology of friendship. Like one of the things that we talked about in that lesson was how theology is part of our DNA because that's how God made us. Because God himself is a relational God. God himself exists in a perfect relationship within the Trinity, and we have been made in his image, and because he's a relational God, he's made us to be relational beings who are meant to be in relationship with one another. So all sorts of other things that we can say about that, but that's kind of, in a sense, where we were going with that. Now, the next 2 were ones that I wasn't here for, so you're going to have to help me. What did you learn about the grace of friendship?
Grace the person?
Not Grace the person, although she's very nice.
I've tried to listen to that one several times because I wasn't here and it will not come up.
Uh-oh.
I stopped my phone and restarted it and everything, so
Okay.
it loads, but I haven't been able to see it.
Okay. Well, that's good. We're going to need to make mention of that somehow that recording is not doing what it should. Okay. Going once?
I can tell you, I actually used the threat of friendship the night as soon as we left here. I was
Oh,
able
really?
to use something that Pastor Austin said, and that is you can take conflict and you can use it as an opportunity to glorify God. And I was able to do that in a conflict that happened while my husband was sitting in the other class.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And
So,
fix everything, and it truly has glorified God, and I'm very excited about that.
because one of the threats of friendship was conflict and having that different perspective that it's an opportunity to glorify God.
It was so helpful.
That's great. And the fact that you were able to like put it into practice minutes after you heard about that.
As soon as we left.
Wow. Okay. It's like God was like, here you go.
I even left the parking garage
Hey, look at that.
that quick.
All right. So watch out for the parking garage, people. There's conflict waiting to happen.
It was resolved.
Wait, which parking garage did you park in? This one? That one? So park it, if you're parked over here in the west garage, you're good. But that one's
The
bad.
conflict was completely resolved.
Good. That's awesome. That's great. So wonderful testimony of how immediate application of the lesson there of threats of friendship was applied. Thank you. It's great.
I want to care for the grace of friendship.
Uh-huh.
Can I give something a shot?
Sure.
I think the grace of friendship provides us the opportunity of being shown grace
Mhm.
by your friends
Yeah.
who know you and who accept you as you are. Because your friends should know the best of you and the worst of you,
Which we're going to talk about tonight.
and they should love you for who you are. And I just think that's an example of showing friendship grace.
Yeah.
And I also think we show friends grace because we were shown grace. And the more grace we're shown by God and by others, the more we should demonstrate it.
Yeah.
By even close.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you are, because one of the things that for this book, one of the things that I really love about this book is the subtitle. It said we're made for friendship, so he talks about how we're created by God for friendship. But the subtitle is the relationship that halves our sorrows and doubles our joys, which is a quote from J.C. Ryle, who was the Bishop of Liverpool back in the late 1800s. And that's a quote that comes from him, and I think that's describes what they're getting at in terms of the grace of friendship, that here is a goodness of the Lord that he provides for you, that you have somebody to shoulder your burdens as well as experience joys of life together. So it kind of sounds like what you were getting at in terms of being vulnerable and somebody who you can care for and somebody who can care for you, and all that is bound up in this understanding of having grace of God in friendship. All right.
Can I give you an example?
Well, let me move on, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about stuff later on. It's okay. But one of the things that I wanted us to remind ourselves of is this is our definition. You see it there in your sheet of paper, that biblical friendship is an intentional bond of selfless affection that is Christ-centered, built on trust, so that two people can journey through life together with loyalty, openness, and vulnerability to the glory of God. And I added loyalty because I remember there was somebody who made a comment about loyalty in one of the previous lessons that we went over. So I added that to this definition that we have. This is kind of what we worked on our first session together. And so this is what we're using as our definition of biblical friendship. Now, as you can see, we have 3 points that we're going to go off of tonight. And the first thing that we're going to be looking at is friendship attributes. So things that are a part of a friendship and could describe as we're thinking about how to cultivate friendship. So these are things that we are looking for in terms of biblical friendship and what they should look like. So the first one is the foundation of trust. And a lot of the stuff that we're going to be looking at in these first 6 points here actually are drawn out of our definition. And so this first one, having this foundation of trust, and we look here at Proverbs 17:9, it said, whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends. So when we talk about trust, what are some ideas that come to your mind?
That you can share and know it's not going any further.
That you can share with that person and they're going to keep it to themselves. Yeah, keep it in confidence. What else? What else do we think about when we think about trust? Vulnerability can be a part of that because I think that's connected. The fact that you can share and you know that you're opening up your heart to them and they're going to treat that with care. So vulnerability, one. What else?
I think when a friend sees you going off track, to be able to tell you. And
I'm going to hold on to that because that's another one coming up. But I think another thing that we can think about is trust in the sense of, you know, that this person is going to do what they say they're going to do. Like if they tell you, hey, I'm going to bring you a cookie on Thursday, they're going to show up with a cookie on Thursday, right? Yeah. So trust. The next one, the strength of affection. The strength of affection. And this passage here in Colossians 3:14, this verses 12 and 13 give a lot of Christ-like characteristics in terms of compassion and gentleness and patience. And then verse 14 says, and above all of these, so above all of these Christ-like characteristics in verses 12 and 13, above all of these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. What, or I should say who, is a good biblical example of a friendship that's characterized by this close bond of affection? David and Jonathan, most definitely. Yeah, David and Jonathan. I mean, and that's kind of easy because we just looked at them in Sunday school not too long ago, right? We got to see their friendship played out in the sense of Jonathan understanding who David was, and what did Jonathan give up? His kingship. Yeah, there's that moment where he passes over his bow and he passes over his cloak and passes over his armor because he recognizes who David is and what David is going to become. And he's understanding that God has moved on from my dad, which means that he's moved on from me being king, and so I'm going to be devoted to this man. And so it's a wonderful relationship that we get to see. Third is the consistency of loyalty. And this is part of the reason why we added that to our definition earlier, the consistency of loyalty. Proverbs 18:24, a man of many companions comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Maybe you've heard this phrase, so see if anybody can finish it for me. A man who is a friend to everyone is a friend to no one, or has no one as a friend. But what is this passage helping us to understand? What's the problem with having lots of friends? You can't be that close to them. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later. And we're going to use Facebook as our really good example. I can't even remember the last time I posted anything on Facebook. And if people didn't reach out to me, I wouldn't connect with anybody else, even though I have like 850 friends. Right, yeah. But this verse is helping us to understand is that when we have many companions, there's nobody really around. But when we have this one or two close friends, they stick closer than a brother. They have these qualities of trust and affection and loyalty. Fourth, the openness of transparency, which is this is what we were talking about a little bit before in terms of vulnerability, the openness of transparency. 1 John 1:7 tells us that if we walk in the light as he is in the light, so we're walking in the light of Christ. The glare is probably pretty bad there from there. Yeah. Well, so, and my forehead too. It's okay. I get it. That was good. That was great. No, I keep telling people, our church that we were at back in Washington, they actually had to change the settings on the camera when I preached because of the glare. It's okay. I get it. Yeah.
Well, your shirt makes the cameras go.
Oh, that's true. I'm just messing everybody up. But here we go. We're going to talk about being in the light of Christ, which, what is the point there? What does John want us to understand there in terms of walking in the light? What does that mean? Walking in the light as opposed to being in darkness, and darkness is identified as sin. And so when we are staying out of darkness and walking in the light, what is one thing that happens? Well, you can see. Openness, we can see, and when we come into the light, particularly if we're coming out of the darkness, we get to see our ugliness. We're seeing our sin. We're allowing ourselves to be exposed. We're allowing ourselves to be honest and transparent with people. And when we're honest and we're transparent, particularly with our sin, what is this verse helping us know happens? We have fellowship with one another. When we are open, when we're honest, when we're walking in the light, when we're transparent with one another, we have fellowship with one another because the blood of Jesus has covered all of our sins. And so when we understand the forgiveness of sins that we have, we can know that we can be transparent because we have been forgiven by Christ, which is so much better than anything else, and that is how we can have true fellowship and true friendship with others. Fifth, the faithfulness of candor. Now this is what you were getting at before. The faithfulness of candor, because we have this passage in Proverbs 27, 5 and 6. Better is an open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. What do you think he's getting at when he's talking about hidden love?
Only a friend would tell you something. If you're doing something, could be harmful. Your enemy's like, yeah, let him trip up and see what happens to him. But
Yeah.
the friend says, Ryan, did you know that blah blah blah?
He's had to say that to me a lot of times, so it's a very familiar conversation that we've had. No, just kidding. No.
Ryan instead of John.
Right. No, so hidden love, meaning like I could say that I love somebody, but if I don't ever express it or don't ever show it, what good is it? But this verse is helping us to know that better is an open rebuke and a willingness to be able to confront, a willingness to be able to call back, a willingness to be able to call to repentance is better than hidden love, because that is an action of love. Just, the classic, if you see somebody heading towards the cliff, what are you going to do? You're going to try and stop them. We've all been parents. For those of us who've been parents, and in a parking lot, what is it that kids typically seem to do in parking lots?
Run out in front.
They run out, they just leave and they run. And what do you need to do with kids who are running in the parking lot? Tell them not to do that. Why? So they don't get hurt, because you love them. You don't want them to get hurt. And so you call them back. And that's kind of the image what we're going for here with this openness or this faithfulness of candor, having this honesty and this willingness to be able to call to repentance and confront when needed to. Last is the sweetener of empathy. The sweetener of empathy, which is the unfortunate thing about the word empathy is that it's a word that's been hijacked as of late that doesn't mean what it originally meant. And I'm using it in the original intention of showing care and concern for somebody in a difficult spot, so much so that you want to help them. And we have these verses in Romans and Galatians that we are to rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. And so this type of relationship, this type of element in friendship is what sweetens the relationship. That you have somebody who is there, who is ready and willing to cry with you when you're crying, to celebrate with you when you're celebrating, to bear the burdens that you have, to lighten your load as you walk this path of life. So here we have these 6 characteristics, or 6 attributes of friendships, and I want to hear from you guys, because I'm pretty sure that there are faces and names that you can point to of people who exemplify these characteristics. So, who might that be in your life who exemplifies some of these characteristics? Somebody that you know you can trust. Your wife. That's great. It's wonderful. Anyone else? Maybe you're all just fearful that we're going to steal your friend. Your good friend Nate. Does he live here in Jacksonville? Does he live here in Jacksonville? He does. How often do you get to interact with Nate?
Probably, last couple of weeks, several times, but not too many more than twice a month.
Okay.
Eye to eye.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
He's certified too.
ACBC certification. ACBC. So he's already my friend.
I'm certified.
Yeah. We like Nate. Go Nate. Good job. Well, like I said, we can probably all think of people that we have in our lives that, to varying degrees, we can point to that this is somebody who cares for us, who is one who weeps with us when we weep, is somebody who is loyal to me. And we can praise God for that. Now we're going to move into friendship skills. So these are some of the skills. So I think you have listed there 5 of them. And these are these friendship skills that, this is not an exhaustive list, but I think this is a good starting point for us to think through what are the skills that we need to be practicing in order for friendships to be initiated, strengthened, built, and to continue. First one, obviously, is communication, right? So many problems happen with either bad or a lack of communication, right? We have this passage from Ephesians 4:15 and 16. It says, "Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love." And so this is giving us a very clear understanding of the type of communication that we're supposed to have. That we're supposed to speak the truth, but do it in love, which is a very important balance, a very important connection, because what happens if you only speak the truth? What's the danger there? Being harsh. What else? Judgmental. Yeah. Self-righteous. Ooh, that's a good word. Yeah. So harsh, judgmental, self-righteous, all of these things can happen if you speak the truth. Like I could look at somebody and say, "Oh my goodness, you have a big fat booger on your face," which would be truthful, right? But is that loving? No, definitely not. What if we only sought to be loving? It might not be truthful. You'd be mushy. Oh, that's a good word, mushy. You might just try to, good example, I'm going to use your example of conflict, if you just sought to be loving without truthful, you would have just, I want to be peaceful and nice, and I just want to use kind words, I just want to love you, and what would happen though? Would the conflict have been resolved? No. So that's a really good example. If we seek just to be loving without sharing truth, then something like conflict doesn't get resolved. So it's a good balance of speaking the truth and love, that we're needing to make sure that we are speaking honestly and truthfully, but doing it in such a way that is a benefit and a help to the person that we're speaking to, because that's the word for love. That's the agape word, that we're making this choice to do what is beneficial and best for the person that we're speaking to. Because oftentimes if we're just simply speaking the truth, it's more about us than it is about the other person. And speaking the truth in love is more about the other person than it is about us. So communication. Second, conflict resolution. Because we are, all of us, really good at making conflict. One of the key books that we use in our counseling ministry is a book called Peacemaking for Families. And on the back of the book, it says, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there's a conflict waiting to happen. And we do that because our natural sinful inclination is to think about who first? Ourselves. And if I think about myself first and foremost, thinking that I'm most important, and you're thinking about yourself first and foremost, that you're most important, that's not a recipe for friendship, that's a recipe for conflict. And so we need to have good conflict resolution skills, which the Bible gives us. Matthew 5:9, Jesus says this in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." And what Jesus is saying here is that the children of God are to be known as peacemakers, as those who make peace. Why? What has God done for us? He has made peace with us. So we were the ones who were God's enemies. We were the ones who were hostile in mind and engaged in evil deeds, in rebellion against him. We were the ones who were shaking our fist at God. But he made the first step, sending his son to be the propitiation of our sins so that we can be forgiven and redeemed and be now at peace with God. And so because we have peace with God, because he has made peace with us, we now, as his children, are to do the same. Seek to be peacemakers with others, which indicates that there are things that we need to do, skills that we need to have, work that needs to be done in order to be a peacemaker. We'll just think of it this way, if I had the job as a clockmaker, what would I do? I make clocks, right? I put forth effort to make sure that I can produce a clock. And if we're to be peacemakers, what are we supposed to do? Make peace. We are to put forth effort to make peace. We are to have difficult conversations in the parking lot so that conflict can be resolved. Because let's just say I'm having conflict with Rustin right now. Hypothetical situation. We're not. Me and Rustin are good. Just want to let everybody know. Hypothetical situation. If I'm having conflict with Rustin, I could not say a word. And we're not arguing, but have we reconciled our conflict? No. So that's me avoiding conflict and running in the opposite direction than actually making peace. Next, time together. This is very clear. This is a no-brainer that in order to have a good relationship with somebody, you need to be spending time with them. We see here in Acts 2, verse 46. This will come up later, but day by day, attending the temple together, they were breaking their bread in their homes and receiving the food with glad and generous hearts. And so we have these relationships being built within the early church right after Peter preached his sermon and right after 3,000 people who were joining the church that day, people spending time together, breaking bread together, and receiving this goodness. Number 4, worshiping together, because we're talking about biblical, godly relationships. And I know one of you asked in the beginning of our time the first class about can we have close relationships, close friendships with non-believers, and I hope to get to that answer next week. But because we're talking about biblical, godly relationships, we are talking about worshiping together. Colossians 3:16, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. So we are joining together in worship together, singing songs, praising God with thankfulness in our hearts. And last skill is honoring or serving each other. Honoring and serving each other. Now, why would this be a good skill to have? To honor or serve one another.
Well, when you're serving, you get to know other people.
When you're serving, you get to go know other people. Okay, that's good.
Can possibly develop a friendship.
Yeah.
Well, you're not looking for anything for yourself.
Yeah. Not looking for anything for yourself. What else? You're putting somebody else's need in front of yours. Very important, very significant. Now let's look at it this way. How does that make you feel when you're on the receiving end of that? When you're on the receiving end of somebody putting your interest above their own, what kind of attitude or what kind of perspective do you have on that person? You know that they love you. You know that they care for you. You know that they think that you're significant enough to be mindful of. Bottom line, we just feel good, right? Yeah. Romans 12:10, love one another with brotherly affection. I love this line, outdo one another in showing honor. I like that because I'm a sports guy and I like competition, and that's kind of couched in the phrase of competition, that we need to outdo one another in honor. It's almost like we're in a competition to see who can be more kind to one another is basically what that verse is saying. And think of that kind of relationship, particularly because, Rustin, you mentioned marriage. Think of if marriage was practiced in this way, if husband and wife had this competition to see who could be more kind to the other one. How much more sweeter would our marriages be if that was our perspective? And now thinking about it from the standpoint of friendship, how much closer and greater would our friendships be if with the 2 or 3 people that I'm close with, this was our perspective, that I'm trying to outdo you. I'm going to win by being more kind than you can be. I think that's a great thing to think about. Now we're getting into friendship practices. And I think if I'm seeing correctly on your notes, yeah, they all start with W, right? Now that I didn't do that. I know I'm a Baptist preacher, and I've said this before, that they all either have to alliterate or they all have to be different. But this actually comes from the book, and so it wasn't me this time. But they say these 3 things. First, with wisdom, number 1, having the practice of priority. That in order for us to have good, godly, biblical friendships, we need to make it a priority. What do you think is the number 1 reason that people give as to why they don't have any friends? We don't have time. Which makes sense between work and family and church and other activities that we have. Our time gets filled up. And so this kind of points to that same adage. We make time for the things that we think are important. And if we're going to think and if we're going to believe that friendship is important, we need to make it a priority. So number 1, we need to make it a priority. Number 2 is commitment. So not only do we need to make it a priority, but it takes commitment because, like we said at the beginning, we're cultivating friendship. And just like we need to cultivate our gardens, and when we cultivate our gardens, in order for them to be successful and grow things and not kill things like I do, you need to be committed to doing the necessary groundwork, to getting the weeds out, to watering, and to do the work. And so it takes commitment. This last one, contentment. Contentment. What are some thoughts that you guys have when you hear the word contentment? Just in general, that doesn't need to be connected to friendship at this point in time, but contentment. What does contentment mean? Satisfied? Huh? Being at ease. So satisfied, being at ease, being accepting what, in a sense, it's satisfied and accepting what the Lord has given to you. Not always wanting more or less. I like that. That's good. Yeah. We definitely want less pain. I don't like being content with pain, but that's okay. That's another story. But here, we're talking about friendship here because, and this, in a sense, gets to an understanding of just the ebb and flow of life. How many of you are friends with the same person you were friends with in fourth grade? Yep. Same person that you were friends with in fourth grade. Since kindergarten, really? Wow. What's their name? Deirdre. And you raise your hand too, sir. In Ohio. Look at that. In Illinois. Wait, say that again. Nursery. So you guys, so even before you talked, you guys are friends. What's the name? You can't be friends with yourself, Matt. That's not. It's another guy named Matt. Did you see this guy in the mirror? Is that? No, that's great. So nursery, and you were just in fourth grade like 2 years ago. So just kidding. What's his name? Jesse. Great. Look at that. So that was actually more than I expected. This is awesome. That's great. That's wonderful. But if we look, but the majority of you didn't raise your hand. Because this is part of the ebb and flow of life, that people come into our life and people go out of our life. That God brings friends into our life for a certain period of time, and he brings friends out of our lives. And so this is how God is, in his providence, causing our life to work. One of the things that we can say for our experience, for myself and our family, we have lived in 3 out of 4 of the corners of America. I grew up in Southern California, my wife as well. Before we moved here, we were in the Seattle area for 12 years, and now we are down here in the free state of Florida, the first red state that we've ever lived in. And we're very thankful for that. And we have friends and we have family, and we had relationships and friendships in each of those places. And there are people there that we once were friends with that we're not friends with anymore. Not because anything bad happened, but because that was just part of the process of life. And we have friends littered throughout the country. And I'm pretty sure you guys do as well, that you keep up with on varying different levels. And so that's part of contentment. And one of the other pieces of contentment is this understanding that in order to have really good and godly friendships, we're really only going to be close to a handful of people. Earlier in the class, I put up this graph that came from the book, and this kind of talks about the concentric circles of people that are involved in our life. One of the other examples that he uses in the book is friendship lanes. And I don't know what part of the country that he lives in, but I don't think this analogy works here in Florida, because he talks about how the left lane usually has less people in it than the other lanes. Exactly, right? So like I said, that analogy does not work here in Florida, because it's like this all the time. But he talks about how there's more people getting on and off the on-ramp. Those are your acquaintances. And that you get closer and closer. It's fewer and fewer cars until even in the left lane, there's somebody driving in the lane with you. And then you have your closest friends that are actually in the car with you. But most of us, the cars that we drive, can only fit 3 or 4 other passengers, right? And so this is, in a sense, what he's talking about in terms of contentment, being content with focusing in on the 2 or 3 or 4 people that we have the capacity to really be close with. Does that make sense? Okay. So making it a priority, being committed to it, and content with what the Lord gives you. Next is weeding. And these are some of the things, we're going back to our gardening analogy. These are going to be things that, like weeds that you need to take out of your garden, these are things that you need to make sure are taken out of your friendships because they can be detrimental. First one here is smothering. Proverbs 25:17, let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you. Yeah, wear out your welcome. Now, this is one of those things where a lot of these weeds are going to be I don't want to say the opposite, but they're connected to some of the skills that we need to have. So one of the skills of growing godly relationships is spending time with another person, right? Have you ever had the experience of, I've spent a little bit too much time with this friend? I'm glad that this person is in my life, but I don't necessarily want them right now, kind of statements. I think we've kind of all been there, and that's what this verse is telling us, that yes, we need to spend time with people, but there's also a danger in spending too much time with somebody, and it could end up being a detriment. And so we need to make sure that we're wise about that we're not spending too much time, because when we spend too much time with somebody because we want to spend too much time with them, who are we more focused on? Ourselves. That I want you in my life because that's what's going to make me happy. That's when the danger. Huh? That's why we have Jesus, who's a friend that never leaves us. Yeah, exactly. So smothering. Next one, a sharp tongue. A sharp tongue. We talked earlier about the need for candor and how faithful are the wounds of a friend. But that can quickly move into attack. Here's one of the things that I'm going to say this. Back when I was a youth pastor at our church in Washington, one of the things that we would do is we would have Blue Card Sunday, which every Sunday, the last Sunday of every month, kids had an opportunity to write on these blue cards a question that they wanted me to answer. And one of the questions came from a very insightful young lady who asked the question, is sarcasm sin? Is sarcasm sin? That's a very good question. Because if you look at the etymology of sarcasm, it literally means tearing flesh. Sarx, flesh. So it's tearing flesh. And a lot of what falls into that category could be what people would call just joking around, just having some fun. I'm just kidding. But there's a danger there because oftentimes it's toying with a line. And because we're sinful and because we're not always as wise as we think we are, we can often cross that line. And having that sharp tongue is something that is detrimental to these relationships, even though we might be wanting just to have some fun with our words. So this is something that I think is something that we need to think about, something that we need to be mindful of, because it is something that can really damage people. Passage, Proverbs 12:18. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Now, this is a very simple softball answer. Which one of those phrases do you want to be? Do you want to be the one who's stabbing your friend all the time? Or do you want to be the one that's bringing healing to your friend? Next one, gossip. Gossip. There's a book that we use in our counseling ministry on gossip, and they give a really good definition of gossip, that it's bearing bad news behind someone's back with a bad intent. The other way that I've always understood it, it's all the things that you say about the person that you would never say to their face. Where flattery is on the flip side. It's all the stuff you say to their face that you would never say behind their back. So that's the other side. But gossip is where we're tearing people down behind their back. Here we have Proverbs 16:28 and 17:9. A dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisperer separates close friends. He who repeats a matter separates close friends. We talked about this at the beginning when we talked about trust, that we trust people, that we give them our vulnerable information, and they're not going to do anything with it. But what happens when they go outside of the circle? What happens to our relationship? We are now separated. We can no longer be friends. The trust has been damaged.
I heard an expression, murder, it's murder by a polite form of murder by character assassination.
Murder by character assassination. I like that. Yeah. Last one is focus on self. And this one is, yeah. No, it's focus on self. That's it. That's the answer. Focus on self. That you are in a relationship for what it brings to you, the benefits that it brings to you, as opposed to having the mindset of loving your neighbor. So these are just a few of weeds that can grow up in our relationship that we need to make sure that we get rid of. Are there any other examples, any other thoughts from you guys that could be added to this list? Now, I'm not going to say that this is confession time, that you have done those things, but I think we get an idea here of stuff that we need to be mindful of that is detrimental to our relationships. James 3:16, for where jealousy and selfish ambition exists, there will be disorder and every vile practice. Think about that. Where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there's every vile practice. Jealousy and selfish ambition open the door for every kind of sin. You talked about murder. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, says that when we are angry with somebody, what are we guilty of? Murder. Because typically we get angry with somebody because they are getting in the way of what we want to do. You're hindering me, you're blocking me from doing what I want to do. So you need to be moved out of the way. You need to be eliminated. And what is the greatest form of eliminating somebody? Murdering them. That you are permanently eliminated from my life. And so Jesus is saying that at the heart of anger is the same heart of one who is murdering because you're looking at somebody who needs to be eliminated, who needs to be gotten out of your way. And the greatest form of that is murder. That's why he says that he equates those two. So, those are some Yeah. They have lots of activity going on upstairs. Now we're going to look at some, in the last few minutes here, the work that we need to do, or some of the practices that we can engage in. First and foremost is face-to-face. 2 John 12, he says, though I have much to write to you, I would rather not use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to come to you and talk face-to-face so that what? Our joy. I don't know about your experience here in Florida, but what was it like when you started having church again after COVID? It was wonderful. Why? Why was that so great? I mean, you were going to church before. Why was it? I mean, you were online. I mean, wasn't that good enough? I mean, your Zoom calls? Come on now. Wasn't that great? We lost it. Yeah. So having that face-to-face, person-to-person interaction brings about this joy. Even though John is writing a letter to people that he loves, Paul does the same thing. He's writing letters to people that he loves and he's praying for, churches that he planted. But what does he want to do? I hope to see you soon. I want to come and visit you. I want to see you face-to-face. Which this connects back to some of the things that we said before in terms of making things a priority, making commitments to do so, scheduling time to have these kind of face-to-face interactions. So having face-to-face. Second, side by side. So you're having face-to-face conversations. Now we're doing things side by side. Again, we have 1 Thessalonians 2:8. We have Paul. He says, so being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves. Because why? You had come dear to us. And this is also, like in this context, is where Paul was talking about being a tent maker because he didn't want to be a burden to the people. But he was dear to them, and he cared for them, and he wanted to share his life together with them. Rustin, you said just a little bit ago about how you get to know people better when you serve alongside of them. How many people in this room have friends now because you started serving in ministry together? Yeah. Some of my closest friends that are scattered throughout the country are people, guys, that I served together in ministry with. So doing things side by side, which here again, as we're thinking about it, it doesn't necessarily need to be something that you do in ministry, but just doing life together. One of the examples that he talks about, he must be a basketball guy because he talks about watching NBA games. I don't watch NBA games, so that didn't resonate with me. But if you're planning on watching a game, just inviting somebody to come along and watch the game with you at your house. If you're just going to sit there by yourself, why not invite one of your friends? So doing things side by side. Next, knife and fork. Knife and fork. Having a meal together, eating together. What is a cliche Baptist activity? Potlucks. Thank you very much. That's what Baptists do when they get together. They eat. Many of you were here already and sitting down at the dining room. West Hall. Sorry, West Hall. It's not the dining room anymore. West Hall. That's what they call it now. Yeah. Yeah. The dining hall is in the, well, you can call it whatever you want. Now I'm going to give you that special.
But leadership needs to call it West.
I know. It's been the dining room for decades. So we shouldn't change it now. But knife and fork, meaning having a meal together. Think about it this way. We had this verse already up. that day by day they were attending the temple together, breaking bread in their homes and receiving their food with glad and generous hearts. This is Acts 2. This is the foundation of the church. But what's going to happen in eternity? Revelation 19:9. What's going to happen? We're all going to get together. And it's going to say, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Now, I once heard a theologian say that there's going to be food in heaven, which means you can eat, but you're not going to need to. I don't know what that's going to be like. But
Gonna be pizza up there?
is it going to be pizza? Of course. Of course there's going to be pizza. I think there are going to be two rooms. There's going to be the pineapple people, and then there's going to be the normal people. Just kidding, just kidding. I have pineapple on my pizza too. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. And last is words and words. Words and words. And that's not me repeating the same word, but it's talking about two different types of words. And we have these passages here in Proverbs. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and settings of silver, like the cold snow in the time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him. He refreshes the soul of his master. Don't you want to be the type of person who refreshes the soul of other people? And so when we talk about words and words, we're talking about spoken words, but we're also talking about written words. And I'm going to highlight this book right here. It's called Practicing Affirmation by Sam Crabtree. And it is a wonderful, wonderful explanation on how we can use godly affirmations to strengthen our relationships. That we're using godly affirmations to help people understand that we are for them, that we support them, that we love them. And the analogy that he uses is not that affirmation is the secret to having good friendships, but it's the key to get in the door. It's called Practicing Affirmation. Practicing Affirmation. Sam Crabtree.
And it's forwarded by John.
And it's forwarded by John Piper. So all of those things are beneficial.
Yeah, just
So practicing affirmation, or what we're saying here in terms of words and words, that you're using your words to give encouragement, you're using your words to affirm people, what you notice is good and godly in them. Like, think of it this way. So not only we use the example earlier about if someone thought about you and put your interest above their own, that just made you feel good. One of the ways that we can also do that is with our words, whether that's a text, email, handwritten note, or just saying something simple of what you appreciate about them and what you're thankful for them, and what you see God doing in their life. Like, if you were just to come up to somebody and say, you know what? I'm glad you're here at church today. What might that do to a visitor? Somebody who you've never met before, came to church for the first time, and somebody came up and said, I'm glad you're here.
You know, I've been here for on and off for a month. I mean, I missed a lot
Uh-huh.
because you guys got shut down a lot. But today, his friend, what's that guy's name?
Josh?
Josh. Yeah, he was actually the first person that actually came up and introduced himself. I usually introduce myself.
Yeah.
And he came up and introduced himself and said those words, and he said, "I'm glad to see you here today.
Yeah.
I saw you. You had to take care of something, but I wanted to make it a purpose to come and introduce myself. How can I help?"
That's great.
So, I've been coming to church since I was 16. I'm 27 now, and so it just,
You missed it. You missed the joke. He said he's 27 now. Yeah.
I'm 56. So, I've been going to church a long time. And,
Yeah.
And you just see a difference between churches that reach out and love on people,
Yeah.
and churches that just take for granted those who come and visit.
Yeah. And so those kind of statements can be very encouraging, and just to notice it doesn't take much effort, and it'll can brighten somebody's day. So we're going to go ahead and end there and hopefully get into some more practical stuff next week. But let me pray, and we will call it a night.